You will be asked the question, "Who are you?" hundreds if not thousands of times in your life. From a great deal of trial and error, I can tell you that when people ask this question, they are not anticipating a discussion about the mystery of identity that philosophers have debated for thousands of years. It turns out what they are really asking for is a list of very specific facts about yourself that your culture has deemed most defining. And in those cases, I suppose it's fine to respond with that list, but it makes for an unbearably dull conversation. The far more interesting interpretation of the question is the one that prompted the first of 3 maxims inscribed at the Temple of Apollo at Delphi: know thyself. The other 2 maxims being nothing in excess and surety brings ruin, in case you were curious. But know thyself has stood the test of time, if not in practice then at least in phrase, because knowledge of yourself is fundamental. After all, what use would money or power or even other knowledge be if you used them all on things you don't even value because you don't know any better? The real tragedy here is that you can't answer the question, "Who are you?" by Googling for an expert's opinion, because the question, "Who are you?" is unique, in that you are the most qualified person in the world to answer it. So let's take a closer look at how to view who we are, why it can be difficult to know, and what we can do to discover more about ourselves. Let's think about it. Because we have all been so well conditioned to respond to the question, "Who are you?" with that list of facts that aid in other people's stereotyping of us, we need a new way to frame the question, one that gets us beyond common facts to our identity as a whole. Luckily for us, thousands of years of thought and all of humanity's brain power have gone into creating a term just for this concept: your name. Your name, when it's used to refer to you, encapsulates everything that you are. Well, everything that you are to the speaker. To the speaker is an important caveat that makes this a lot messier than if we all had perfect knowledge, because your name can mean different things depending on who says it. Let's try a thought experiment to see what I mean. Imagine you meet someone new. You decide to introduce yourself as a normal person rather than a philosopher, so you tell them your name and a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do, other small talk. Now, imagine that the next day you see them and they say, "Oh, hi," fill in your name. What does your name mean when they say it? Well, your name probably consists of a lot of whats: an engineer or a teacher, someone who's tall or someone who's short. They don't know you well, and so your name can only have so much meaning. But let's imagine a second example. Think of someone who loves you, someone who knows as much about you as anyone else you know. Maybe it's a parent, a partner, a close friend. Now, imagine that you see them for the first time in weeks or months, and they give you a hug and say, "It's so good to see you." Again, fill in your name. What does your name mean when they say it? Who are you in their eyes? Don't worry about putting it into words. Remember, the value of thinking about our names is that they go beyond a list of facts. What your name means in this context can just be a feeling. That feeling hopefully encompasses far more than the facts evoked when a new acquaintance said your name. Still, we might be able to go further. Let's do this once more, but this time you don't have to imagine anything. Say your name to yourself. Now what does your name mean? Who are you when nobody else is looking? Nobody else is there to define you. Who are you through your own eyes? It's interesting to think about our identity from these 3 perspectives: those who do not know us well, those who know us very well, and self-reflection. But which is the best measure of who we are? I think it's safe to say that the view of those who don't know us well is not very complete. Even if it may feel important for the hours we're scrolling through Instagram, they just don't have enough information about you, and they may even jump to false conclusions about you, good or bad, based on the little that they know. The second perspective, that of those close to us, surely is more valuable. Their view may even offer us objectivity that we ourselves might struggle to have. But even those close to us have not seen every action we've ever made, or heard every thought we've ever had. For that, we have to turn to ourselves. It seems clear that we each have the most insight into who we are. So then I ask again to the leading expert on the subject, who are you? I don't know to what extent the average person knows who they are. It's not something people talk about very often, even when you regularly badger them with philosophical questions. But when you face a question that people don't talk about enough, it's always best to look at the philosophers who have abandoned dense books as a medium, artists. And in books and movies and other forms of art, we hear stories of identity being elusive, even when searched for intentionally. Other times, people are confident in their identity until a new or challenging circumstance shatters that image. So it seems it can be quite difficult to understand who we are. Why is that? As we just covered, we have lots, or at least the most, information about ourselves. So there must be something standing in our way. Or more likely, many things standing in our way, but I can't be expected to think of them all, so let's take a look at one in particular that's directly related to the three perspectives from which we've considered our identity. I wonder, when the average person thinks about who they are, how do they balance these three perspectives? Do they focus mostly on the perception of strangers, the perception of those closest to them, or how they view themselves? It seems a healthy self-image should be skewed towards the latter too, but what happens if we focus too much on the first? Luckily, for the past 15 years, we have been conducting a global case study on this, with billions of volunteers dedicating hours to platforms specifically designed to reward us for eliciting a positive perception of ourselves in other people. What effect does this have on our sense of identity? Well, some streams of social media have been created to promote healthier self-perception, but it seems even they were created as a counterculture to the problems that naturally arise when we so heavily focus on the perception of strangers and acquaintances. Of course, social media is just one instance when this is the case. We focus on the perception of others in many circumstances. It's not inherently bad to want people to have a positive perception of you. It's easy, however, to become hyper-focused on that perception, especially when you're meeting new people, or more generally in the public eye, both of which seem to be ever increasing in frequency. The tipping point is when you are so focused on creating a positive perception that you prioritize it over creating an honest perception. The result is that we create a facade that covers up who we are with who we want to appear to be. We might have many facades, one for colleagues, one for friends, for strangers, each a slight variation that covers up part of ourselves. There are a couple of dangers with facades. One is that creating a facade sparks a losing competition, one in which you want to be the absolute best. Unfortunately, no matter how smart you appear to be, there will always be someone who knows something that you don't. No matter how rich you are, there will always be someone who has something that you don't. No matter how popular you seem, there will always be people who don't like you. But more importantly than the impossible competition is the fact that no matter how great your facade is, it will never be you. The facades we create may damage our identity because they can distract from or even muddy our self-perception. We might like our facade more than an honest view of ourselves, and so we focus only on the facade, or begin to blur the line between the two, believing that our facade really is who we are. As a side note, facades can also damage relationships. To what extent can we be loved, respected, valued, if we are not known? This is most obvious in close relationships, where we allow ourselves, often slowly, the vulnerability of being known. But how might facades be inhibiting the connections we make with acquaintances, neighbors, strangers, leaving us, with increasing frequency, bowling alone? Back to our main topic, our present concern is that facades can make it difficult, even for us, to know who we are. So how do we live up to the millennia-old maxim? We do what we are most unable to do. One of my favorite quotes is by Blaise Pascal, who said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Of course, leave it to a philosopher and mathematician to say everyone needs to sit quietly and think more. But professional egoism aside, isn't Pascal right that human beings dislike sitting quietly in a room? What makes it even more interesting is that Pascal wrote this in the 1600s. There were no smartphones or computers to blame, and yet people still did not want to sit quietly with their thoughts. Granted, human beings are naturally social. We need to interact with others, but we're still more comfortable watching a show, or reading a book, or listening to music alone than we are being still. Why is that? Let's pretend we understand the puzzle better by proposing two obvious and collectively exhaustive possibilities. Either we have an overwhelming desire to pursue these engaging distractions, or an overwhelming dislike of sitting with our thoughts. It's probably hard to say broadly which of these is the case. Likely it varies from person to person and even moment to moment. It's safe to say that the kind of activities that prevent us from sitting quietly are attractive, and in some cases even habit-forming or addictive. But I also think it's true that there's a discomfort with the alternative. When we sit quietly, free from distractions, what we're left with is sometimes unpleasant. We might face the worry or stress from which activities distract us, or racing thoughts carried by the momentum of the activities we've just stopped. Maybe those too quiet and we're left thinking about big questions, whether we're fulfilled at our job, whether we're being a good partner in our relationship, or what exactly in life is most important to us. We go to great lengths to avoid unpleasantness. Don't like walking? Here's 2 wheels and some pedals to make it easier. Don't like pedaling? Here's a wildly expensive 2-ton box of steel to get you where you need to go. And that makes a lot of sense in some cases. For instance, avoiding the pain of touching a hot stove prevents us from hurting ourselves. But there are other times when unpleasantness, even to the point of pain, is good for us. The pain of a cut is right to avoid until it's in the case of surgery. In that case, the pain is necessary for long-term wellness. So the question becomes, is the discomfort of quiet introspection the kind we should avoid, or the kind that makes us better? It's not perfectly straightforward. Anxiety comes to mind as a clear example when the discomfort of introspection risks becoming harmful. Anxiety can sometimes be helped by mindful introspection, but someone suffering from it could also be hurt by blindly embracing more and more introspection. That being said, many of the unpleasant thoughts in introspection are the healing kind, specifically those that center around, what should I be doing? Pondering important decisions and personal values might lead us to recognize our own shortcomings, and that may be painful, but it's the kind of pain that will make us better moving forward. It helps us understand who we are and who we want to be. When we avoid it, we miss an opportunity to develop a stronger sense of who we are. That's not to say the question of who you are can be easily answered after a few moments of introspection. On the contrary, it's one of those exciting puzzles that seems to become more complex the longer you look at it. Yet, in my experience, I have only ever felt that I know myself better each time I look at myself honestly. Even when I learn that something I thought I knew was wrong, or recognize ways in which I fall short of who I want to be. Even that knowledge brings me a little closer to understanding who I am. I like to think that who you are is discovered as much as it's created. I like to think that it can be investigated and mulled over for an entire lifetime without being fully known. I like knowing that there is one mystery worthy of a lifetime of investigation that I am best positioned to study. Next time someone asks you who you are, think about it.